There is a type of childhood that does not look like trauma on the surface. There are no bruises, no raised voices that the neighbors can hear, no obvious signs that something is wrong. From the outside, it looks like a child who is mature for their age, responsible, reliable, the kind of kid that every teacher praises and every parent points to as an example. But behind that maturity is a truth that no one talks about. That child did not choose to grow up. They were forced to. Not by a single event, but by 1,000 invisible moments where the adults in their life could not or would not carry the weight they were supposed to carry. And so the child picked it up. They became the mediator in their parents' fights, the translator of adult emotions, the second parent to their younger siblings, the steady presence in a household that was anything but steady. And by the time they were 12, they had the emotional vocabulary of a 40-year-old and the unprocessed wounds of a 5-year-old. If you were the child who never got to be a child, who skipped the carefree part of childhood and went straight to responsibility, survival, and emotional labor, then this is your story. And it matters more than anyone has ever told you. This is the psychology of people who grew up too fast. Before we go further, there is something you need to understand about yourself. The reason you feel like you have been tired since you were 10 years old is not because something is wrong with you. It is because you have been carrying adult responsibilities since before your brain was developmentally capable of handling them. Developmental psychologists have a term for this. It is called parentification, and it comes in two forms. Instrumental parentification is when a child takes over practical household responsibilities, cooking, cleaning, managing finances, taking care of siblings. Emotional parentification is when a child becomes the emotional support system for one or both parents. Both forms share a common outcome. The child loses their childhood, not in a dramatic, visible way, but in a silent, chronic way that accumulates over years. They miss the developmental stage where they are supposed to learn through play, make mistakes without consequences, and rely on adults for guidance. Instead, they learn through crisis management, and the consequences are always real. Research from the journal Child Abuse and Neglect found that parentified children score significantly higher on measures of anxiety, depression, and emotional exhaustion in adulthood, but they also score higher on empathy, emotional intelligence, and problem-solving ability. This is the cruel paradox of growing up too fast. It makes you exceptionally capable and deeply wounded at the same time. You are not imagining the exhaustion. You are not being dramatic when you say you feel like you have been running a marathon since childhood. You have been. The only difference is that no one gave you a medal for it. They gave you more responsibility. And the adults in your life did not see what they were doing because to them, you were the easy child, the one they did not have to worry about, the one who handled things. And every time they said that, what you heard was, your needs do not matter. The roots of this pattern go deep, and they usually begin with a family system that was structurally unstable in some way. It does not have to be dramatic. In fact, the most common cause of premature maturity is not abuse. It is absence. A parent who was physically present but emotionally unavailable. A parent who was dealing with their own unresolved trauma, mental illness, addiction, or chronic stress. A parent who was so overwhelmed by their own life that they unconsciously leaned on their child for support. In single-parent households, this dynamic is almost inevitable. When one parent is responsible for everything, income, child care, household management, emotional regulation, something has to give. And too often, what gives is the child's right to be a child. The oldest child becomes the co-parent. They walk younger siblings to school. They heat up dinner. They handle bedtime routines. And they learn that their value in the family is directly tied to how useful they are. In two-parent households with conflict, the dynamic is different but equally damaging. The child becomes the emotional buffer. They learn to read the tension between their parents. They learn when to be quiet, when to intervene, when to distract, and when to disappear. They become hyper-attuned to other people's emotional states because their sense of safety depends on it. And then there is the experience of growing up in poverty. When a family is in survival mode, childhood luxuries like play, imagination, and freedom from worry are replaced by awareness of bills, food scarcity, and the constant low hum of financial stress. Children in these environments grow up with an adult's understanding of money, sacrifice, and the fragility of stability, all before they learn long division. Regardless of the specific circumstance, the outcome is the same. The child develops what psychologists call a false self. This is a version of the self that is built entirely around what other people need. It is competent, it is responsible, it is always available, but it is not authentic. The real self, the part that wants to play, to be carefree, to be held, to be taken care of, gets buried. And it stays buried, sometimes for decades, quietly aching beneath a surface of functionality. Adults who grew up too fast share a set of patterns that are so consistent they could almost be called a syndrome. The first is chronic self-reliance. They do not ask for help. They do not delegate. They handle everything themselves, not because they are control freaks, but because they learned early that relying on others leads to disappointment. They became their own safety net because the adults in their life were not one. The second is an inability to rest. They feel guilty when they are not productive. Weekends make them anxious. Vacations feel uncomfortable. They do not know how to simply exist without doing something, because in their childhood, existing without contributing was not an option. They earned their place in the family through labor, and they carry that equation into adulthood. The third is attraction to people who need saving. Because they were conditioned to be the caretaker, they are magnetically drawn to partners, friends, and situations that require emotional rescue. They mistake this dynamic for love, and they end up in relationships where they are once again the giver, the fixer, the strong one, the one who holds everything together while receiving nothing in return. The fourth is a deep discomfort with receiving. They can give endlessly. They can sacrifice without hesitation. But the moment someone tries to give to them, take care of them, or prioritize their needs, they do not know what to do. They deflect. They minimize. They say you did not have to do that, not out of politeness, but out of genuine discomfort. Because receiving care feels foreign to a nervous system that was trained only to provide it. The fifth is the midlife reckoning. At some point, usually in their late 20s or 30s, the structure collapses. The exhaustion catches up. The resentment they did not know they were carrying surfaces. They look around at their life and realize that they have spent decades taking care of everyone else and have no idea who they actually are when they are not needed. This is often the moment when the grief of the lost childhood finally arrives. And when it arrives, it does not come as sadness. It comes as rage, a deep, disorienting anger that seems to have no specific target. Because the truth they are finally confronting is that they were robbed of something that can never be returned. The scientific evidence on the long-term effects of premature maturity is extensive and sobering. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology found that adults who experienced parentification in childhood were significantly more likely to develop anxiety disorders, depressive episodes, and burnout in adulthood. The study noted that these individuals often presented as high-functioning, meaning their internal distress was masked by external achievement. A longitudinal study conducted at the University of Michigan tracked parentified children into adulthood and found that they were more likely to enter caregiving professions, nursing, social work, teaching, and psychology, not because of a calling, but because the caretaker identity had become so deeply embedded that it guided their career choices unconsciously. Neurological research has shown that chronic stress during childhood, the kind that comes from being hypervigilant and perpetually responsible, alters the development of the prefrontal cortex and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. In practical terms, this means that the brain of someone who grew up too fast is structurally different from someone who had a typical childhood. Their stress response system is permanently calibrated for crisis, even when no crisis exists. Research from the Adverse Childhood Experiences study has also linked childhood stress and premature responsibility to increased risk of chronic health conditions in adulthood, including autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular disease, and chronic fatigue. The body absorbs what the mind cannot process. Perhaps most significantly, a study from the journal Development and Psychopathology found that parentified children often struggle with a specific form of grief that therapists call ambiguous loss. They grieve a childhood that they can see other people had, but that they never experienced themselves. And this grief is complicated by the fact that there is no obvious villain. No one abused them in the traditional sense. They were simply needed too much, too early. And that is why this wound is so hard to heal. Because how do you grieve something you never had? And how do you blame someone who was just doing their best? Let us slow down and talk about what this actually felt like. It felt like watching other kids play while you stood near the door, making sure everyone was okay. It felt like knowing your mother's credit card balance before you knew your multiplication tables. It felt like lying in bed listening to your parents argue and planning what you would say to each of them tomorrow to keep the peace. It felt like being 10 years old and having a 30-year-old's understanding of disappointment. Like being praised for being so mature and wishing someone would just let you be small. Like sitting at a dinner table surrounded by adults who saw you as one of them and not realizing that being included in adult conversations was not a privilege. It was a theft. And now, as an adult, it feels like being exhausted in a way that sleep cannot fix. Like being surrounded by people your age who seem to know how to have fun, how to be spontaneous, how to waste a weekend doing absolutely nothing, and feeling like you are watching them from behind glass. You understand the concept of play. You just cannot access it. It feels like being the person everyone calls when things fall apart and having no one to call when you fall apart. It feels like carrying the weight of the world and being told you make it look easy. And the cruelest part is that you do make it look easy, because you have been practicing since you were 6. And somewhere, buried beneath decades of competence and self-reliance, there is a child who just wanted to be held. Who just wanted someone to say, you do not have to be strong right now. Who just wanted permission to cry without solving the problem first. That child is still in there, and they are still waiting. The world gets this one spectacularly wrong. People who grew up too fast are often admired. They are called old souls. They are praised for their work ethic. They are held up as examples of resilience. And while resilience is real and should be respected, what the world mistakes for resilience is often survival. There is a significant difference. Resilience implies choice. It implies that a person faced a challenge and rose to meet it. Survival implies necessity. It implies that a person had no other option. And most people who grew up too fast did not choose to be strong. They simply were not given the luxury of being weak. The other thing the world gets wrong is timing. People assume that if someone survived a difficult childhood and turned out fine, then no healing is needed. But growing up too fast creates a time-delayed wound. It does not surface in childhood because the child is too busy surviving. It surfaces in adulthood when the survival mode is no longer necessary, but the nervous system has not received the message. This is why so many high-achieving, seemingly successful adults suddenly fall apart in their 30s. It is not a midlife crisis. It is a childhood crisis that was postponed by 30 years. And the world's response is usually confusion. But you have everything. But you are so successful. But you seem so put together. And the person is standing there thinking, yes, I know. That is the problem. I have spent my entire life performing stability, and I do not know who I am without it. Healing for these individuals is not about becoming stronger. They are already strong. Healing is about finally allowing themselves to be soft. If you grew up too fast, here is what healing looks like for you. It does not look like confrontation or dramatic breakthroughs. It looks like something much quieter and much harder. It looks like learning to do nothing without guilt, Start with 10 minutes. Sit somewhere comfortable and do absolutely nothing productive. No phone, no task, no purpose. Just exist. Your nervous system will resist this violently at first because it was trained to associate stillness with danger. Do it anyway. It looks like practicing the phrase, "I need help," without adding, but it is not a big deal. Ask someone for something small and let them give it to you without deflecting or minimizing. Let someone take care of you, even if it is just making you a cup of tea. It looks like reparenting. This is a therapeutic concept where you learn to give your inner child the experiences they missed. Buy yourself something impractical and joyful. Watch a movie in the middle of the day. Color with crayons. It sounds childish because it is supposed to be. That is the point. It looks like setting boundaries with the people who still expect you to be the strong one. Saying, "I cannot carry this right now," is not failure. It is the beginning of a life where you are not defined by what you provide. And it looks like grieving. Really, truly grieving the childhood you did not get. Not with anger, although anger will come. Not with blame, although that may come too. But with compassion. For the child you were. For the adults who did their best and still fell short. And for the life you are only now beginning to build for yourself. You grew up fast because you had to. Now it is time to grow at your own pace, because you choose to. If this reached something inside you, if there is a part of you that heard these words and felt seen for the first time in a long time, I want you to know something. You did an incredible thing. You held a family together. You kept people safe. You carried weight that was never supposed to be yours. And you did it as a child. A child who should have been worried about homework and friendships and what to watch on Saturday morning, but instead was worried about whether the electricity would be on or whether mom would be okay. You deserve credit for that. But more than credit, you deserve rest. You deserve to put the weight down. You deserve to discover who you are when you are not needed, because that person exists, and they have been waiting patiently for you to finally give them a chance. You did not fail your childhood failed you. And the fact that you are here, functioning, caring, surviving, is proof that you are made of something extraordinary. Now it is time to stop surviving and start living. Not for anyone else, for you. This is Unspoken Minds. Why, and your inner child just heard every word.